If you ever walked in on your parents or grandparents watching a film, chances were John Wayne was on the screen. One of the biggest film stars of any era, he got famous by portraying a cowboy, basically becoming a piece of Americana himself. But while the Duke may have been one of the most beloved actors, he himself was not above getting into some petty spats, fierce rivalries, and some back-and-forth hatred. In fact, he had some pretty big beef with actors who are still working today. When most people look back on John Wayne, they think about this no-nonsense attitude and his ability to bring a grumbling gunslinger to life on screen. But then there are people who remember him in a different light, as Wayne's list of enemies could wrap around a city block. So, how did certain individuals like Steven Spielberg wind up in his crosshairs? Today we're gonna find out. Before we get into the details, please hit that thumbs up icon to show us some support. And subscribe to our channel so you never miss a video. Now, you ready? Well, let's ride!
What happened?
Clint Eastwood. If John Wayne is the first person you think of when someone says cowboy, then Clint Eastwood has got to be the second. The guy has made a career off of a pretty mean scowl and an even meaner performance. From Dirty Harry to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Clint has collected a series of career-making roles that may even rival John Wayne's. So why the heck do the two pretty similar actors hate each other so much? The answer isn't jealousy or anything like what you might expect, but it is instead over one single film. A very dirty one. Yep, Dirty Harry. As it was originally supposed to be John Wayne and not Clint Eastwood, who stole the show as the lead. But when John Wayne was offered the part, he read the script and sent a very nasty letter to Clint, just about how he felt about his portrayal of the Wild West. You see, John Wayne was always proud of the West and thought it was a key part of American culture. He refused to portray a hero who shot other people in the back, or even did anything gray to dishonor his idea of a hero. And that letter he penned to Clint was very mean and rude. And John Wayne's son would later describe the regret that his father felt when the movie became beloved by American audiences. But get this, Clint would continue sending his scripts to John in hopes of working on something together. But John Wayne would not budge, going so far as to throw a version of the hostile script into the ocean and calling it a piece of shit. This one always kinda hurts, because an Eastwood-Wayne cowboy flick would be something we would absolutely watch today. But John just couldn't stand the idea of a less than heroic main character. Steven Spielberg. Now, Spielberg is considered to be one of the best directors of all time, and he certainly has the resume to prove it. In the year 1979, Spielberg had already made Jaws and was in the middle of making his first Indiana Jones film. But that did not mean he had already earned the respect of John Wayne. In fact, of everyone John hated, the beloved director may have been near the top of the list. So why? Well, Hollywood was changing, and morality and politics had already started to infiltrate the big screen. John hated this and believed that movies should be fun experiences about good guys beating bad guys. And you could say that Spielberg was a little misguided. Then, when he offered a role to John in his film 1941, John went on a pretty public tirade against both the film and Steven Spielberg, who was shocked by the reaction. In Steven's mind, this was about giving an iconic actor their late career flowers. But to John, this might as well been a slap in the face. He went as far as calling the movie anti-American, and hated that Hollywood would attempt to make a film about Pearl Harbor a real-life event and make it kinda funny. Steven even asked him to reconsider, but John said making a movie like this would be a disaster. Steven, however, did not heed his advice, and the two never considered working together ever again. Clark Gable. Alright, so Clark and John were actually pretty good friends at one point. Clark was in part of John's inner circle. So if you don't know, John Wayne was famously a pretty reserved guy when it came to who he called his friends. So he formed a tight inner circle. And this group of friends would work together constantly, and they would always have each other's backs. That's a big reason why things would go south between Clark Gable and John. but it's not the only one. The major difference centered around how they viewed themselves as professionals. You see, Gable thought of himself as an actor in the very literal sense of the word. He trained very hard to be seen as an artist instead of an entertainer. But John was on the other side of things. He thought of himself as more of a reactor, responding to the scene and his material in a much more straightforward way. John thought Clark was a bit pretentious, and Clark thought John was a bit simple. However, the two did get along famously for a long time. That is, until Clark began speaking out about how people were treated on the set of Mogambo, a film that he and Wayne were both prominently featured in. And when Clark began attacking the director and sharing details of potential on-set controversy, John stepped in to defend his friend, the director. Because, yep, the director was John Ford, a man who was known to get pretty nasty on the job, but is also known to be one of John Wayne's best friends. John defended one friend over another, and things between him and Clark Gable never seemed to be the same. Their friendship never recovered, and all for a film that most people don't even remember. Frank Sinatra. If I told you that Frank Sinatra, one of the most successful singers of all time, and John Wayne feuded because of a bad hotel booking, would you even believe me? I think it's one of my favorite stories of all time when it comes to celebrity beef. And it didn't take a whole lot of time for this to go from bizarre to downright scary. It all took place in the 1960s at a Las Vegas hotel. Both Frank and John were staying there at the time. Frank had arrived to blow off some steam and have a few laughs and more drinks. And John was staying in the room directly above him while he filmed a movie in the area. While John didn't hang around his room that often, he still couldn't stand the constant sounds of partying that continued throughout the night. So John called Frank's room, asking them if they could keep it down so he could sleep. And of course, they listened, but just for like a minute or two. Next thing you knew it, a furious John Wayne stormed down and banged on the door until someone answered. John demanded to talk to Frank. The problem was, Frank had several huge bodyguards who didn't take too kindly to John's tone. They told him nobody talks to Frank that way, and in response, John backhanded one of those huge dudes. Needless to say, John slept like a baby that night, and there wasn't a peep out of Frank's room the rest of the night. Fortunately for the two, and humanity, they would bury the hatchet eventually, and actually form a pretty good friendship. John, a by-the-books Republican who couldn't care less about style and glamour. And Frank, a free-spirited Democrat who loved the limelight as much as he loved to party. Not exactly likely best buds, but that is what happened. And when John was diagnosed with stomach cancer, Frank and his wife spent days by his side in the hospital. There are a ton of instances of John Wayne butting heads with other celebrities. So if I forgot one, please get in the comments and let me know who. Which of these feuds did you already know about? And finally, are you more of a John Wayne fan or Clint Eastwood? Get in the comments and tell me your thoughts. Before you walk off into the sunset, please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to our channel and come back often so we can keep telling you
What happened?